Welcome to the Good Music Podcast, a show where we discuss artists, songs, and talk about why we love them. New episodes every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Central. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and become a patron to gain access to exclusive content. And now, on with the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Good Music Podcast. I'm Lucas.
I'm Grant.
And I'm Ethan. If it's your first time listening, welcome. But here's what you need to know. You need to subscribe to this. After you listen to the whole thing, we have 3 segments for you. We're going to talk about the band, we're going to listen to some songs, and we're going to have some final thoughts. But after all this is over, and you like what you hear, subscribe. We're gaining subscribers from all over the world, gaining hundreds of subscribers every week. You can find us on social media, on Instagram and Facebook. Comment, say what artist you want us to do next. And if you are a veteran Good Music Podcast listener, then your step is to start subscribing to us on Patreon. You get early episodes, and you get the special After Hours segment, which will be evolving very, very soon. But Lucas, last week we said that we were going to be doing a certain artist, and we kind of took a little bit of a sidetrack. Can you take us on that journey?
Yes, so originally this was going to be a Michael Jackson episode, and we actually have already recorded it. But then, of course, everyone knows why they're listening to this episode, with Eddie Van Halen passing away 2 days as of recording this episode ago. And, I've said before, in fact, if you listen to one of our After Hours segments in a previous one, I had said that I had planned our episodes all the way through to the end of the year. And I said that that's going to stay locked in unless something crazy like a super iconic musician dies. Well, I hate to think that I predicted that something like that would happen, because I didn't. But that is the case here. We're going to be dedicating this episode to Van Halen and to the late genius Eddie Van Halen. One of the, if not the greatest guitar player to enter the rock and roll world. And so everything that all of our other episodes have been pushed back a week. Obviously, the music history and the volume 2s are staying where they are. But our Michael Jackson episode will be coming next week, and you'll have to pardon if we're saying, oh, last week on Iron Maiden on that episode, just because, we recorded that one and then all of a sudden this happened. And we were just like, we have to record an episode about this to pay tribute. Because he is and was truly one of the greats. I mean, he is one of the few that can sit in that top A-list status. I would put him in the top 10 most influential musicians of all time. And we'll get deeper into why that is later in the segment. But it's truly a huge loss. And man, just 2020 has been brutal. It's kind of notwithstanding all the COVID and election and all the craziness that's going on, but just the number of musician deaths this year, it's looking pretty equal to 2016 so far.
Yeah. Especially with the iconic nature of some of the musicians who have been lost. I mean, we had Neil at the very beginning of the year, and I thought that would have been, the worst thing to happen this year. And, little did we know that this year's just been, it's it has been bad all around for every part of life except for maybe the artists at home who like us who kind of are able to stay home and do our craft. Like those are the only people who have benefited from anything this year.
Yeah.
And it's sad to think that we lost the greatest drummer, in my opinion, of all time, who was influential musically, to musicians who are not drummers. And now we've lost, in my opinion, the greatest guitar player of all time. Certainly the most influential guitar player of all time. Definitely really inspiring to me personally and millions of others. He was the reason that a lot of, 12-year-old kids like me decided to not put down the guitar. When I discovered Eddie Van Halen, it was like it was a weird contrast between he's so good and it's like it's wizardry and it's like some kind of weird black magic that he has over the guitar, and yet I can also be like that. It was such a relatable phrasing and way of playing that you felt like you could do it too. And that's what I think people related to. That's what I related to. And part of that is just their songwriting and the way that he wrote his solos. They were all very short for the most part. And so you felt like there were little licks that you could pick up on, little techniques like the Mean Street intro, which, we can talk about later, and the intro to Women in Love, which we can talk about later. They're all just these little gimmicks and techniques that, you want to figure out how to do on your guitar, and everyone could learn how to do them. It didn't take any special effects or any special pedals or anything. You just had to turn your gain up and figure it out. And when you could do that thing, you felt like him. And it was I don't know. He's just like a godlike figure, but his way of phrasing it spoke to you. You phrased it very well in your first episode. If you haven't listened to the first episode, by the way, go listen to that. The way you phrased it in your first episode was spot on. It felt like it was another voice speaking to you, or singing to you, or whatever. But I could go on and on and on, and I will go on and on and on in this section about him. But I'm going to stop for now and let you guys pick up from there.
Yeah. Ethan, since you're not as much of a rock and roll guy, kind of just give us a little background on kind of what your knowledge is of Eddie Van Halen, and if you have any kind of remembrance of, going, yeah, I remember hearing this song, that song before, and kind of what your impressions were.
I would say as a drummer, Hot for Teacher was like one of the songs. Like,
oh yeah.
It was like up there with like, it's like, oh well, hey, can you play YYZ, and that's like the first like kind of weird time signature thing that you learn as a drummer. And then it's like you get into Hot for Teacher and it's like, well, I have no idea what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I still have no idea like exactly what.
It's one of the greatest drum tracks ever laid down.
And so I know him from a respect level, but whenever I was really into like rock and stuff, I like almost like skipped over Van Halen and went like straight to Dream Theater and Prague. And so it's not out of disrespect, but like once I started getting into drums, I gravitated towards drums in the same way that Grant gravitated towards guitar, and so I definitely put him on like the pedestal of greatest rock guitarists like of all time. But my knowledge pretty much ends. I never really got into Van Halen, even like outside of like their big hits. Like obviously like Jump, like everybody, like everybody knows about Jump. Everybody knows about Panama. Everybody knows about Eruption. Like, holy crap, Everybody wants some,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
Like all these, like I'm just like looking back through everything. It's just like just hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as knowledge that just comes from me and society, that's about as much as I know about Van Halen, like any of
Well,
them.
this will be a good education for you. I'll talk about my introduction and experience with Van Halen over the years. So like Van Halen was never one of those bands that I always would put in like my top categories, but they were always a band that just stayed through my listening. Like they were a band that I would almost forget about them, and then when I would come back, I'd go, "Man, I love Van Halen."
Oh yeah, same.
And when I was first starting to get into music, they were one of the first bands that I kind of picked up on. When I've told the story on many episodes of the hard drive that my dad gave me. That was really my introduction. My dad is kind of a Van Halen fan. I'm actually finding out how much of a Van Halen fan he's been over the last couple days. He's like been texting me about different songs that he really loves and asking me questions. And just like, oh, I didn't realize you were as big of a fan. But he gave me 3 songs, mainly because his favorite album was 1984, and so I remember on that hard drive it had Jump, Panama, and I'll Wait. And I'll Wait was actually surprisingly the first one that caught my ears. And that's always kind of a song that's been a special place in my heart because like I wasn't aware of the guitar level because that's a very keyboard driven song. But it was the drums that caught my ear because it's a very lead drum song. And I remember that was one of the very first songs that I ever like sat down and tried to piece together every beat that was going on in my, at that time, probably only playing drums for like 6 or 7 months. And then, but then it was when I heard Eruption for the first time. I remember it's one of those times that like, I usually can't remember a lot of times the first time I hear a song. That's one of the songs that I know exactly where I was. I know like what time of day it was. I know where everyone around me was. And specifically when he hit that tapping section towards the end, I remember just like my mouth opening and just like, what is happening? How is he doing that? And I remember I asked my dad, I was just like, is is this like sampled from an arcade game? He's just like, nope, that's just him on the guitar. I was like, oh my gosh. And then from that point, I got their greatest hits album, listened to that all the way through, and was just from that point, it was just like, okay, yeah, I'm on the Van Halen train. But just to, like I said, they never were a band where it was just like I would always put them. They were in my top 5 favorite bands. There were always other bands that I gravitated more towards, but Van Halen always stayed in my level of yes, I love Van Halen.
Mm-hmm.
And each time that I've come back to them, I've learned more about them, discovered new parts of their discography I hadn't gotten into before, and just continuing to learn and understand how important they were. So that's kind of been my experience with Van Halen. So it's interesting. We've got Ethan that's very low on the experience, me that's somewhere in the middle, and then Grant that's like,
Yeah, he's
that was one of if not your favorite bands.
It's one of Grant's 4 pillars.
This if I had pillars of like what I listened to, they would not be one of those because I don't listen to Van Halen that much anymore. But if we talked about like pillars of influence, they would probably be close to the first pillar. It would definitely consist of Rush and Van Halen and probably one of the big 4. And then just, I don't know, pick another band. But it it's really funny because if you have you ever watched the Smithsonian interview with Eddie?
No, I haven't.
So it's really great. You should listen to it. But he talks a lot about these different stories about him, and kind of like, you know, the story of his life is basically him and his brother. They're actually Dutch. They actually immigrated when he was in like grade school, and he didn't know any English. And so it was him and Alex trying to learn instruments so they could kind of fit in, is what I remember. And so, right, and so Eddie wanted to play the drums because the big thing at the time was drums, but he came home and found out that Alex was playing him better. And so, which is really weird to think about, that it wasn't
Yeah.
it wasn't as much Alex settling for drums, it was kind of Eddie settling for guitar. And I'm glad he did, because like here we are. But it and you're right about him ripping guitars apart. He would take humbucker pickups and dip them in candle wax to try to keep the buzz out, keep the hum out, because there was noise still associated with them. And you know, he ruined so many pickups melting them in candle wax. And finally he got one that he dipped it in, and as soon as it started to wrinkle, he just ripped it right out, and it was the greatest sounding pickup he'd ever listened to. That's the one that's in the Frankenstrat, and that's how pickups are made today. With picks, guitar picks, he had the problem that they would fall out of his hands when he was playing, because he'd play so aggressively. He's one of those guitar players that he'd set his tone to what it was, and then he'd kind of play with the volume knob to get it to where he needed it, so he didn't have to worry about a pedal board or anything. And he would play really aggressively sometimes because he'd have his volume kind of at half or whatever. But he'd drop his picks so much, so he started gluing sandpaper to the sides of the picks so he wouldn't drop them. And now we have picks that have the sandpaper grip. So it's crazy that he's also influenced a lot of technology too.
Yeah, that was, I think, one of the most surprising things. Like, you know, this episode, just a little peek behind the curtain, like, this is very much a more thrown together at the last minute kind of episode. You know, not having as much of the ardent research as normal, but I still spent the last couple of days kind of just trying to absorb as much as I could. And that was one of the most interesting things I came across, was how much he contributed to the actual gear and technology aspect of guitars. That it wasn't just his playing and his songwriting, but it was like, finding out that, you know, the way that I also read the story about the pickups. I mean, I didn't really know what a lot of it means, but when they would say it was just like, and now that's how everyone does it, I'm just like, gosh, dang.
Yeah.
And like, there was something about his amps that he started to tinker with, and now everyone does that with their amps.
It must be the multi staged amplification.
Whatever that means. I'll let you explain what that means.
Okay, so normal amplifiers, it used to be that you would just try to get distortion. You just turn the gain all the way up to 10 or whatever, and so it'd kind of clip, and then that's how you'd get the distortion. It kind of turned into a square wave. But they found out very soon, and actually Alex Lifeson was another guitar player to kind of experiment with this, although he didn't do as much the technology side. He just kind of experimented with the sounds of the already existing amps to try to turn them into kind of a multi-stage sound. But you'd have, you know, multiple amplifiers that would feed into each other, not actual like amplifier head like units, but the circuitry in those would have smaller amplifiers in them, smaller tube amplifiers that would kind of go into each other, and they would play off each other in really weird ways. And it's hard to explain because it's such a complex science. I once tried to understand it, but it was too much. But and another big thing he did was he pioneered the whole British brown sound thing. You know, take a Marshall amp.
Yeah, that was another thing
Right.
I was gonna head to, is his revolutionary tone.
Yeah, take a Marshall amp and just turn everything to 10. And British amps are so good at being able to respond to that high distortion, high gain. American amps suck at it. It's just I don't.
Yeah, I had heard the story, and literally just reading this today, that like on the American amps he was turning them all the way up and it still wasn't near enough power. And so that's when
It's not
he
that
moved over to the British
it's not that it's
amps.
near enough. It's just that the American amps get screechy too. They lose a lot of bottom end, and it's just I don't know what we're doing wrong here on this side of the pond, but they do it better over there. But yeah, and so that's I don't want to say that he turned Marshall into a huge amp sensation, but that's kind of how everybody started using them afterwards. And
Yeah.
phasers too. He kind of made the phaser become, you know, less of a like ooh spacey whatever, and more into like, oh, this is how you kind of distinguish a solo from, you know, not a solo or whatever, instead of just turning it up from the mix. That's one of the reasons he used phasers. It was pretty much just a phaser and a flanger and a wah and the amp itself that I can really think he ever used. I can't remember him using wah on a song specifically. I'm sure he did, but
It's I can't think of any
yeah. But
instance.
I know there is one on his pedal board now. I remember seeing it during when he was promoting the 5153S, which is another story. But
And then the last thing that I caught that he really uh, introduced technology wise was the idea of suspension in the strings, because of his frequent use of dive bombs.
oh,
And again, I'm speaking in terminology that I don't quite completely understand, so I'll have you kind of do the actual technical
suspended
explaining.
bridge.
Yeah.
Right. So if you think about it mechanically, the strings of guitar really act like springs. They have a lot of tension. And so when you string them up too much, obviously you're going to pull the bridge out or whatever. And if you want to dive bomb too hard on a normal bridge, it's almost a hardtail. It's just kind of locked in there sort of loosely. You know what I'm talking about, where it's not a floating bridge, but you still got the whammy bar.
Yeah.
It just kind of, yeah. I know all the guitarists know exactly what I'm talking about. You can't dive bomb those down to the octave lower that he did on Eruption. You can't do that. You're going to break the guitar. You're going to rip something apart, and it will never be able to be played again.
Yeah, and he was kind of the first one to figure out a way to dive bomb like that, and it not go out of tune or break.
Right, and so what you would do for a floating bridge, you have springs in the back of the guitar. So now you have the springs in the back and the strings that are kind of counteracting each other, and the whammy bar is now just moving that bridge, so it's distributing the tension from the strings to the springs or vice versa to be able to go up or down. And he originally had, or I think most guitar players today, I certainly do, have the locking nut, you know, at the top of the neck to keep it from sliding around on the nut, so you get like tension caught up in the head or in the strings or whatever and going out of tune. That's how you go out of tune. But he found out pretty quickly that actually if you rub pencil lead along the nut, it makes, you know, it completely loses any friction, and so you'll lose that tension, and the strings will not go out of tune that way. And it's a lot, he found that was a lot easier on his guitar. He's ripped apart so many fretboards too that just got me thinking. He had to get every few weeks. He played guitar so much, right? You said he was walking around with a guitar everywhere he went. He played his guitar so much that he had to get them refretted every 2 weeks because he would do so many bends too. And if anyone's ever had a guitar that has gotten its frets run out, you know that it's a sad moment because it's not the same. But he eventually came up with the idea of stainless steel frets, and then now we have stainless steel frets.
Wow.
So we can do all the crazy bends and whatever, and our frets.
It's just amazing. Just like, again, I never knew about that side of him.
Right.
That when I was learning, I was just like, golly, I mean, no wonder. It's building his case. And so that's what I want to lead into the next section about the greatest guitar players of all time and about where he stands in that ranking. I was thinking through it, and in my opinion, it's really kind of just almost a deadlock between two men, and that's Jimi Hendrix and Eddie Van Halen.
Oh.
And I want to kind of talk through that, explain my reasoning for that.
Okay.
If you have different opinions, you can present your case. But to me, I think about guitar, and you have the really early innovators like Les Paul and Robert Johnson and Chuck Berry that kind of just, really set the foundation for what the guitar would be. But as far as moments in rock history where someone released a piece of work and the entire way the guitar is even looked at completely fundamentally changes, is when Are You Experienced came out in 1967 and when that first Van Halen record came out in 1978. I look at all of the other great guitar players, and in my opinion, to be considered the greatest, you can't just have incredible technique and ability. You had to have had some kind of lasting, deep impact on the entire guitar world, and not just in specifically your own genre that you play in. And both Jimmy and Eddie have had that. And to me, I look at the other ones, some people like Eric Clapton or Jimmy Page or some of these other guys that, when you look at their first work that's being released, they're not yet at the point of being the greatest in the world. Like, you look at the first couple Led Zeppelin records, Jimmy Page is good, but you can tell he's still sculpting his style. It's really when you get to Zeppelin 3, 4, and Houses of the Holy that's when he really emerges as a dominant guitar player. Same with Clapton. He had a long time in the Yardbirds and with the Blues Breakers, and it's when he gets to Cream that he really starts to exert his influence on the guitar. When you look at both Jimmy and Eddie's first records, they're completely fully formed when that first record comes out. I mean, listening to Van Halen, that first album, he's already the greatest in the world at what he's doing. He, obviously he does grow, but there's not this slow burn. It's all of a sudden just he's there. No one knows who he is. And all of a sudden he's blowing everyone's mind that's listening to him. And Hendrix.
Well, you know why that is.
Yeah. And Hendrix did the exact same thing. I learned a lot about this because originally a Hendrix episode was going to be coming this month, and now that's been pushed to next month. So I've kind of been in the bit of the same brain space of examining why everyone says Jimi Hendrix is the greatest of all time. And I think that that's a big component of it, is that when they introduce themselves to the world, they already played in such a revolutionary way that everyone else was just trying to keep up. And I think that they're the only two guys that have ever really done that, to where even the greatest of the great at their time are still perplexed and not sure how they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah. I would say that my personal opinion goes right to Eddie of those two. But that's just because, Eddie had the guitar culture that Jimmy created to build off of.
Yeah, I mean...
And so, yeah, you could make the argument that there'd be no Eddie without Jimmy, but Eddie still did it.
Yeah. I think when you look at what Jimmy did, you could say that it was a little more impressive because of how little there was before he came. There was essentially hardly anything modern at all about guitar playing before 67. Pretty much just about everyone was copying what the blues had already been doing for about 20 years at that point. There were people that were really, really good at it. I mean, Eric Clapton was the best blues player in the world at that point, but, that's mainly still what he was doing. He was playing the blues. And when Jimmy came along, it was just like all these techniques, these phrasings, this rhythm playing. It was just on a level that nobody didn't even conceive. It wasn't even anyone's thoughts. And I think how much he created something out of nothing. Like, you don't hear a lot of previous influence in his own work. He's like his own influence. And I think that, but again, when Eddie comes in, it's almost the exact same thing. And, his technical skill is still so immense, especially for that time. And to me, I can see it going either way. In fact, I don't think I can pick between the two, because in some ways they're identical, and in some ways they're completely different. It kind of depends on if you go with the argument of what came first, the chicken or the egg. Could Eddie have done what he did without Jimmy? And does that make Jimmy better because he did it first, or Eddie because he improved on what he did? It's an interesting debate, but in my opinion, no one else can enter that debate. It has to be one of those two.
Okay. I will be okay with you saying that he is one of two of the best.
Yes.
I would be okay with top two.
You're not gonna talk about my man.
You can survive.
You're not gonna talk about my man BB King or my man Stevie Ray Vaughan.
No.
Again, they didn't. They're incredible. I would say that they're the best of what they did, but they also weren't revolutionaries. They were just perfecting everything that had come before them. They weren't taking it in new directions. These were the two guys that completely changed the entire landscape and direction of where guitar was heading. When Stevie Ray Vaughan came on, oh yeah, he's a contender for the greatest blues player of all time, absolutely. But when he came along, not everyone in the popular music world didn't try and start playing like him. When both Hendrix and Eddie came on, absolutely everyone started following what they were doing.
That's fair.
Yes, that is true. And it's weird to think that Eddie didn't necessarily invent like crazy wild techniques to the like. He's not doing the Michelangelo Badio stuff.
Yeah.
where he's sweep picking all over the place, and he's like playing with his hands opposite, and he has like 4 guitars that are linked together or whatever. It's still one guitar.
Yeah, and that's why
It's
I think
still his hands just the way they are, and for the most part, it's new spins on very old, very kind of classical techniques, really.
Mm-hmm. That's why I think that you can't judge who the greatest guitar player of all time is by pure skill. Because, yeah, there are people that are technically better than both of those guys. You know, to say that no one ever was more proficient at the instrument than them is just 100% false. Yet at the same time, these people that are technically better did not have the same impact on the instrument that those two had.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's these two big bangs where guitar was literally one way, and then that their debut album came out, and then it was almost like a light switch came on and everything changed afterward.
Lucas, if you had to choose between the two, who would you pick?
I mean, I
Be
think
biased.
that I would have to go with Hendrix, mainly just because of the template that it set for literally everybody. Where with Van Halen, you could say less so that his style went into more pop territories. It was more of he just influenced the entire rock, hard rock, heavy metal scene 100%. Where Hendrix, I think, had a bit more of a wider influence on the genres as a whole. As well as the fact that he made something from a little more nothing than Eddie did. I think that his he created a larger foundation, and I don't think I would have been able to accurately make that answer though had I not just finished in a very intensive Jimi Hendrix research, because that was literally the entire point of that, is because I never understood. Like, I understood why Eddie was considered one of the greatest, but I never understood the Jimi Hendrix one. I was just like, really? He's the greatest? And then I just was like, that was my mission. I had to know the answer. And now I feel like I understand. And so, but man, I'm telling you, it is a hair difference. And the minuscule hair difference.
The number 3 spot is a lot farther away.
Yes, I believe so. I think that a number of people could take that 3 spot.
Yeah.
But to me, it's there's the match has always been between those two, and I feel like depending on the situation, the argument, the context, it could go either way. So, yeah, that's my rationale for that. And if you guys don't have anything else you wanted to cover, we can move on to the next segment.
I have a lot more, but I'll try to keep it brief. You did say in the last episode that Diver Down is one of the worst Van Halen albums, but I encourage you to listen to it because it's one of the few Van Halen albums that not few, but like it's one of the Van Halen albums where no matter what kind of mood I'm in, like any day, any time, you can put it on. I will listen to the entire thing start to finish. Diver Down, 1984, 5150, and the debut are probably those 4 that are fantastic.
So I actually did listen to it again yesterday.
Okay.
And I still don't like it. I do think of the classic period of the David Lee Roth period from Van Halen to 1984. I do think it's the weakest one.
There is a song on there where the Van Halen father actually plays on it. He plays the oboe
On Big Bad Bill.
Yeah.
See, I think that that's one of their worst songs.
It's cool. That album is not meant to be like their. If you put that album in the context that if you really think about the context that you put it in the last episode for Van Halen, it's not meant to be their big 1984 Black Album.
Here's the thing.
Whatever.
They didn't even want to make that album.
Right, but if you think about
it, and you can tell the passion.
Like,
the passion is not. It's in some of the songs.
It is. If you think about it, just being them throwing some stuff together and playing it, then it sounds amazing. It sounds like them being real. It's one of my favorites.
I completely disagree because Eddie and David were at each other's throats on that album.
They were on 84 too.
Yeah, but let me tell you what, it's so much more cohesive on 84. Now, to say that Diver Down is a bad album, I'm not going to say that because it is a good album. It's just not a great album compared to the other albums. I would say Diver Down and Van Halen 2 are kind of the weaker albums of that time period.
Okay, Van Halen 2 also has some really good whatever.
It does. Absolutely does.
I'm going to defend
There's no Van Halen record of that era that doesn't have some strong songs on it. Because
Van Halen 2 isn't a start to finish all killer.
Especially when you put it in the context of it coming off the heels of that first one. It does feel like a step backwards. Now, there's some incredible songs. Beautiful Girls, Women in Love, Dance the Night Away, Somebody Get Me a Doctor.
Ooh.
But then you also have songs like DOA, Out of Love Again. That's just kind of like, it's just not as powerful. And I feel the same about Diver Down. The fact that a large portion of the album is cover songs. Although, again, some of the cover songs, they do really well. Their version of Oh Pretty Woman, I think, is one of their strongest songs. See, I'm a little bit more on that song doesn't work as well.
So good. That is such a good song. Oh, my gosh. I don't know what you're talking about.
But it does have
little guitars.
Say that again?
Little guitars.
Yeah, I was about to say Little Guitars. I think is the strongest song on the album.
What?
Hang 'Em High is great.
I don't know about strongest, but all right. We will probably disagree for days on the worst and greatest Van Halen records and songs.
Which I think that we could make that for a great after hours segment.
That would be great
because I have a bit of a controversial pick.
Do you already have that
best
playlist
album
figured out? For Van Halen.
Bottom. Yes. Well, for the David Lee Roth era, I've already got that scheduled. But I figure because normally we talk about just an artist's worst songs. I kind of don't want to do that on this episode. It doesn't feel very respectful when someone dies and go, let's talk about the worst songs they ever made. I think more having a debate on what we think is the best would be a more fitting way to pay tribute.
Yeah.
So, and then, when we go to our next actual episode, because then we'll have our music history episode, But when we get to our next volume 2, we can absolutely talk about worst songs again.
Yeah.
So, but yes, I have ranked them though, just to again kind of help me collect my thoughts, listen to the songs, and just kind of recenter my mind on all things Van Halen.
I will definitely be saving my favorite Eddie moments for After Hours too.
Yes, because there's a lot of great Eddie moments that have not made it onto an episode yet. So
and if I kept going, I would probably mention them in this section. But
yeah, you already mentioned a couple.
If you want to hear that, then you should go to our Patreon. Where it is.
Yes, so, you should.
Anyway, I think we can be done with this section.
All right.
Unless you guys have stuff to say. I know I tried to drag it out because it's just there's so much. Because
you just need to accept that Van Halen is one of your 4 pillars.
Maybe I do. Maybe just in
because
spirit,
here's the thing: the way that I define the 4 pillars, not who I listen to all the time.
It's who
because there are moments throughout the years where I'll go a long time without listening to those, but they're what I mean them as. They're the ones that most dictate my tastes, my playing style, and they're the well springs that I return to for inspiration.
You would never get tired of
but
going
I don't.
back to them.
I don't.
Yeah, when I go back to them, I'm just like, yes.
I haven't listened to every Van Halen song.
Well, it wasn't until very recently that I had listened to every Iron Maiden song.
Well, but that's okay. That's because they made an album recently. Whatever.
Well,
okay.
No, not since 2015. I hadn't listened to a lot of their 90s stuff.
Okay.
Because that's kind of considered the low point of the band.
That's the low point of a lot of bands from the 80s.
Yeah, it was a bad time.
Not for
But like right now, my That's true. For if you were a 70s or 80s metal band, the 90s was a really bad time. Pink Floyd mood. That's kind of what I find myself naturally going back to. And it always happens about this time of year. As the weather begins to change.
Huh. Do your 4 pillars follow the 4 seasons?
Not really, except for Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd always rears its head about this time of year.
Okay.
Almost on cue. Yeah. Anyway, we'll go ahead and wrap up this segment. When we come back, we're going to talk about the 6 songs we picked for this episode. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Good Music Podcast. We just finished talking about Van Halen, specifically Eddie Van Halen and his influence over the guitar world. And now it's time to continue talking about that through this next segment, our 6-song segment. This is volume 2, so you all probably should have listened to volume 1, so you should know what's happening. But just in case you don't, Lucas, could you explain to them, what do we mean by 6 songs? Why do we have this segment?
Yes, so this is a bit of a weird place for a volume 2. Normally we put these at the beginning of each month, but obviously this was kind of a special episode as we're paying remembrance to Eddie Van Halen. So these 6 songs are not as much about introducing you to the artist, but about expanding what we already know. Now, of course, there are some big iconic songs on this set, but my goal specifically in this episode was to show us Eddie as an instrumentalist. I wanted to have songs where Eddie was either the focus or one of the focuses of the song. And I wanted to kind of show that in some varying different ways. And so that's kind of what dictated the way that I chose these songs. So it's not just me picking my 6 favorites. It's not me picking what are their 6 biggest ones. as well as trying to find an emotional through from start to finish. That way the songs are transitioning well, and that by the end, hopefully you have a cathartic experience. I certainly did when I put this set together.
Yeah, you
Um,
did. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Again, it was weird because I am not like one of those people that says that Van Halen was my favorite band. They're super near and dear to my heart. I obviously love them, but they weren't, at the same level that Pink Floyd or Queen or bands like those. But I found myself actually tearing up and crying at certain points just because it was just like, the music, it was speaking to me. And so, if you want the music to speak to you as well, there's a link in the description of the episode that will take you to a Spotify playlist. So please make sure that you go listen to these songs. Don't just hear us rave over them and then not listen to them, even if you've heard them before. Ethan and Grant can attest to this, that listening to these songs that you've heard before in the order that they're in will potentially open you to a new perspective on some of the songs. In our Michael Jackson episode next time, we actually talk about that a little bit because your minds got changed on certain songs because of the way they were put in the set.
Yes, that's right. That is true.
So make sure you go listen to them. And we'll go ahead and get into the first song, which, Grant, is
Running with the Devil.
Yes. So this was the first song off of that first album. It was also, I believe, the first single. And this was for just about everybody at that time, everyone's first introduction to Van Halen. And this almost made it onto the first episode, but I felt that for people, if you've never listened to Van Halen before, I wanted to kind of start it with Eruption first, just to set the story straight on just kind of what kind of band and guitar player we're dealing with. So it would probably be, for a lot of people, inconceivable to think that Running with the Devil would not make it onto a first episode. But those are my reasons, and now it is here.
Yep. It's cool to know that this was like the first thing that like most people heard. That kind of puts it into new perspective for me.
Yeah, and I felt, if we're going to be looking and remembering through Eddie, I think it's fitting to kind of go back to the very beginning.
Now, this song is really interesting to be a first song because you have that really weird intro, which we can talk about later. But it also, it's not a guitar crazy song. It's not like the rest of the album, I would say, where it's just solo here, solo there, licks in between every word that David Lee Roth is singing.
Yeah.
There's not really any formal solo. There's some lead lines, but it's pretty much just,
to me,
the same two riffs.
I think that it's actually really brilliant because even if, when you listen to the first record, I think that other people should do this, you kind of got to transport yourself to what else was around at that time, what guitars sounded like. Nothing sounded like what Eddie was playing, not just compositionally, but tonally. I think that starting with something that's not so in your face as the first song, it almost is just like, it's enough shock anyway, just to hear the way the guitar sounds. And he adds little things in there that are so abnormal of that time that it's very much oh, wow, this is interesting. And then the second song on the album is Eruption, and that's when he really introduces what he can do. And then the rest of the album is just blitz fire all the way through. So I think it's actually a genius move to put this at the beginning.
No, that's actually a really good point. You got to ease him up to it. If you open your album with tech death, no one's going to listen.
Mm-hmm.
But that's actually kind of smart. But anyway, I was gonna mention the story on the intro there. It's it's a car horn
That's played backwards.
that played backwards, which I had no idea for the longest time. I thought they had just like done something weird with like a synth or something, because I knew by the time I heard this song, I knew about Jump and I knew Eddie played the synths and whatever. So I thought that's what it was. But it's like, and they do that sometimes. They're in a weird way, they're like Iron Maiden with their intros, where it's like every once in a while they'll just do something out of nowhere for an intro.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which is really weird. It's fitting because our last episode was Iron Maiden, and last time you did Van Halen, the previous episode was Iron Maiden. So we've had Iron Maiden, Van Halen twice now.
Wow, I didn't even notice that.
But yeah, and so
no,
it
wasn't. I don't think. I think it was the Cars was in between those.
Really? Okay.
I think.
Maybe?
I can check right now.
You can go back and look, but I feel like that's what it was.
Yeah, the Cars is sandwiched in between Van Halen and Iron Maiden.
Barely missed it.
Because I knew that Slayer was after Van Halen. I was just like, I wouldn't have done 3 heavy bands like that in a row. I knew I'd put something poppy in the middle of it.
All right, well, never mind it. Oh, it probably didn't show up on my Anchor thing because I already listened to it.
Ah, gotcha.
But which is weird because I already listened to the Iron Maiden, but whatever. But we still did them close to each other.
Yeah, they are still very close. You're right.
Right, and Ethan, and I can't remember which one of you mentioned it, but yeah, this is a good intro because you're introduced to his tone. There's a thing about those great guitar players; they always have just an out there tone. I mean, Randy Rhoads has a tone that's just crazy bad. It's a nightmare to mix. Same thing with, Dimebag. His tone is just what in the world. Eddie, same thing. But all of their tones somehow fit their tone of their fingers. It's an extension of them.
I feel like
if anyone else had that tone, it wouldn't sound right.
For guitar players specifically, like especially guitar players where the guitar sound is so central to the band, it's like,
yeah, it
becomes a part of like their identity as a guitar player, like their tone. You know what I mean? Like it becomes the same as they're playing. Like you can't. Like anytime that you hear someone doing the guitar tone, it's like that's just a ripoff.
Right, and eventually Eddie does change his tone a little bit. It's still definitely him as we get to the Sammy Hagar era, but it's still him behind the strings.
You can always tell when he's playing guitar. There's no one else that sounds like him.
And that's the whole notion of tone comes from the hands. And so you hear the tone coming from the hands every time in this song and Run with the Devil when he does that slide at the end of every riff. And the way that he plays those suspended chords as he climbs up the scale. And the way that, he'll, when they go into the verse and it gets kind of quiet, this is kind of what I mean, where he uses his volume knob to kind of change his tone a little bit. Now we have kind of a more subdued tone. And he didn't have to run over to some amp and hit a button, and he didn't have to like change amp settings. It was the idea of I can be out on the runway in the middle of the audience or completely on the other side of the stadium or whatever, which I don't think he was doing a wireless, at this point. No, he wasn't, because it wasn't a thing yet. But I don't have to worry where I am in relation to my amp to be able to change my tone and completely change the feel while it's still him, obviously, but completely change the feel and the tone of the song.
Yeah. And
that makes sense.
And also just looking at the compositionally, just immediately in his very first song, he greatest riffs ever.
Yeah.
Something so recognizable, so powerful, yet so simple, which actually ends up not exactly being a hallmark of his playing. Like, this is one of the most simple riffs he probably ever wrote, but yet it's so good and so powerful. In my opinion, there's
Yeah.
kind of, I don't even really know how to rank them, but there's three great Van Halen riffs that I think all vie for each other for being his best. One of them being Panama from the previous episode that we did. I think that that's just one of the most genius riffs ever written. This being another one, and then the third one we'll look at later in this episode, and we'll maybe get our opinion on seeing which you think is his greatest riff, or if it's something completely different.
Oh, I think I know which one it is, which I would not put up there, but we'll see which one I think you're referring to. But no, he is a good riff writer, and he doesn't suffer from the Slayer syndrome of great riffs but bad solos. I would say that his solos overshadow his riffs.
Yeah, because that's what he's more known
great.
For. He's more known for his solos, and I think that sometimes his riffing gets overlooked.
I think to have a riff be like that riff is the chorus of this song. Like they say "Running with the Devil" and they have a cool harmony, but like it's a fraction of the actual chorus. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're in the chorus whenever that riff starts, not whenever they start singing the chorus. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
And I think that's a testament to good rock songs where it's just like we're in the chorus because there's a really good musical cue, not just like I'm singing different words now.
Mm-hmm.
Another really notable thing about the way that it's mixed is he's panned off to one side, obviously. And so the reverb is bounced to the other side. And it kind of adds a little bit of space, but like the guitar has its own place in the mix. But it's also important to note that there's only one guitar track all the way through for the rhythm.
Yeah. And when
that happens over and over and over again throughout all of the Van Halen discography is he just does one take.
Yeah,
because he's just that
he doesn't have to have another. His tone is so powerful and so dominant that when he goes to solo, you don't have to have another guitar underneath to help fill the space, because even his lead solo playing is so just
full.
Yeah, that it doesn't. You don't have to supplement it with anything.
This song is a notable exception on the album where there is some overdubbing, but if you think about like "I'm the One," which is an amazing song, I'm glad it was on the last list. It's one take all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Like all those solos and all those licks and everything, the riffs, everything. Is just him doing, one take,
which is insane because that's one of the most.
What in the world?
That's one of the most ridiculous guitar tracks probably ever put down by any man.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's like one of the greatest guitar tracks, and then there's like the greatest drum tracks with like "Won't Get Fooled Again" and stuff. It's like right up there with it. It's like how I when I first heard that song, I listened all the way through Van Halen 1 because I was like, oh, I like some of the songs. I wonder if there's any more that I like. That's how I discovered this song. Is how I discovered Atomic Punk and Feel Your Love Tonight and a lot of really good stuff on the album. This album is just killer. It's all the road tested stuff. That's how it is. And then Kiss discovered them and then got the record.
Yeah, I'd say probably the greatest debut rock album of all time.
Right. Well, yeah, it's because they found out what works for the crowd.
It truly lives up to the term of all killer, no filler. There's no filler on that album.
Yes. Well, okay. I would say Little Dreamer is the weakest.
Well, any song has to be the weakest, but even
it's significantly weaker than everything else. Anyway,
we haven't even talked about how good the bass tone in the intro is. By the way.
Oh, that's true.
Oh, Michael Anthony, the often forgotten, but so important.
He doesn't do a lot. It's pretty much just one note. But like whenever that came in, I was just like, that tone is really good.
So let me ask you this, Ethan. Had you heard this song before?
I'd never heard this song before.
Wow, that's incredible. Because I feel like this is maybe one of their most iconic songs, up there with Jump and Panama. Like, it's one of those ones that just like everyone's heard, Running with the Devil.
Not me.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, this is one that we do in Area 52.
Yeah, last thing I'll touch on this song is, we talk about the fact that his riffing gets overshadowed by his soloing. And I think that the reason I wanted to have this song was because of the fact that where the riff is more important than the soloing, because his solo is very sparse here. It's more of a lead line than it is a solo.
Right.
And for someone that is most known for their solos, I just wanted to kind of start with something that was, let's look at him as a rhythm player and as a riff writer. And so, there's not really, the dissection of what crazy kind of technique is he doing on the solo, and it's more the concentration on is the riffing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I will say, I think my favorite part of this song is like the last 30 seconds.
Oh yeah, when it goes into the chokes.
From going, it's like the transition from the, I guess you'd call it the bridge, like that.
The quote unquote solo
into the chokes, and then like whenever they open it back up, I'm just like, oh, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's pretty much just Alex Van Halen changing up the feel of everything.
And David Lee Roth just screaming out of his mind.
Oh yeah, you see the what was it, Toyota commercial where it was just the isolated vocal of that was the greatest.
Yeah, this song is noteworthy for an isolated, and it's about just going, David Lee Roth is actually a terrible singer. And from a technical standpoint, you might be right, but it's also like so perfect for the music that it's accompanying. If you were to change one thing about that vocal, it would be lessened. There's nothing you could improve about it. It's exactly the vocal that song needed.
I didn't notice it being bad.
Well, that's the thing. You don't notice it's bad. When it's with everything, it's perfect. But it's the thing that when people show you the vocals without the music around it, then like everyone's been making, and it's it loses its quality with the instruments not around it. But it doesn't.
If you want to know what we mean by David Lee Roth being a bad singer, then watch them live.
Yeah, he's not very good live.
He's not very good. Well,
but he's an incredible showman.
If you watch them live, you'll still think he's a good singer. Listen to them live, then you'll understand. Because you're right, he's still a good showman. They are great showmen. I mean, they do the swing from the what is it, zip lines and stuff.
He's doing karate and sword dancing, and
I think they did that during and he hit himself in the nose.
Yeah, that was on
Jimmy Kimmel. Yeah, and
his voice is perfect. It's just that they notice that when you take away the music, you're just like, this.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think we can go ahead and move on to the next song, which is album, and a song that is also up there with their most iconic and recognizable songs, and it's their cover of the Kinks' "You Really Got Me."
Yep.
So So many people for a long time were not aware that this was a cover because they completely transformed this song into something that's completely their own.
They
It's
didn't
funny. I
even
didn't
do
know that.
anything.
Yeah.
They didn't even do anything crazy
No.
structurally or crazy like compositionally. They just performed it with their like special
Yeah,
spice.
I would say the biggest change being just the way that the guitar is being played. I mean, the vocals, the drums. I mean, yeah, Alex is adding some fills, but it's not too far off. It's just all the
Because
crazy
Eddie
guitar.
Van Halen guitar is the Eddie Van Halen guitar is the special sauce.
he's just letting loose completely. So now we've transitioned from Running with the Devil of him laying it back more to now like every second of that song he is just attacking with as much as he has. I mean, you listen.
Grant, I'm surprised that you said that most of the stuff he did one like guitar take through, because this one was not that way either, right?
Rhythm wise, yes.
Oh, rhythm wise, okay.
And so those licks, I think so. I think those were part of the one take, yeah. And the thing about the first Van Halen album, if you listen all the way through, you will notice that also, and this is why I would say that it's probably for most of the album, is if you listen to the individual licks, he's repeating himself a lot. He has a vocabulary that he uses over and over and over again. That's why he's so distinct, is because you're hearing kind of the same musical phrases over and over again.
It's someone's unique accent that they speak with.
It's just something that comes natural to him is the idea. And so it's not like he planned out like, or I would think it's not like he planned out these licks beforehand. It sounds to me like he's just playing whatever feels right.
Yeah.
And it feels right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's take this and the original version. So the original was by the Kinks in the mid 60s. British invasion came over around the same time the Beatles and the Rolling Stones did. This was kind of like their first, and the song is notable for being kind of the first big pop song to feature distorted guitar, which it's laughable to consider a distorted guitar compared to today's distortion, but it was the most distorted hit song at the time. But it's very, very weak in comparison. And but the riff is there. The lyrics are altered slightly, but you know, structurally, for the most part, you've got the same song. But very 60s. It's very pre Hendrix. Just, you know, bow now 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 down now now, repeating that over and over again. You know, you can imagine them in their matching suits the way the Beatles were, and they're just kind of, you know, calmly to the beat with smiles on their faces, very reserved. And you know, it's a song of its time, and so very radically different feel, mood, and sonically from Van Halen. Not only did they outdo the original, but it are universally known as theirs than the original, which that doesn't happen too often.
But the Kinks get paid.
Yes, they do. They're very glad that Van Halen covered them. But you know, it's very much like a All Along the Watchtower, where it's you know, the cover has become in a way very much more popular and known as a signature song by the cover artist than it was the original, to where so many people are amazed that it wasn't their song to begin with. Because there's a lot of times when people do cover songs, you can tell it's just like this, even if it's filtered through their sound. You can tell that songwriting wise, lyrically or whatever, that this isn't their song. Something's a cover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With You Really Got Me, they could absolutely fool you that they wrote this song. And I think that's the proof
did.
of a good cover song.
Right. So I think this is a good time to talk about that freaking guitar solo.
Yes.
Which is ridiculous.
So, Grant, tell us what's going on here.
Oh, Lord. Oh, okay. Well, there's a bend on the 7th fret of the G string up a full fret, and then there's a whole bunch of other tablature after that. It pulls off of some of those blues licks. It dips into some jazziness, some weird phrasing, and some off time phrasing that is very distinct in his later solos, especially the ones on 1984, which is why I love the solos off that album. But even still on this album, he does a lot of stuff that's not even in like a different time signature, or it's like a weird subdivision. It's like there's like no notation for the timing he's using. Especially towards the end of this solo, where he kind of does those weird bends, the like, what is that? I don't even know. And the way that he bends at the end, I think, because the first part of the solo, it's like, yeah, he plays fast and whatever, and those are common licks for Eddie, but at the very end, it shows that weird side of his solo. That too. But even just that last half of the solo proper it's not what you would think a solo would be today. Mm-hmm. Like no one really does that anymore, which is kind of sad. But it's not because they don't want to or because nobody likes it, but because it's just like no one knows how to bring that, just kind of like toss you every which direction but still give you like the lemon face kind of phrasing.
Yeah, it's very much it does feel like that solo is just constantly jerking you in so many directions.
Yeah, there's a lot of ideas.
And very polar opposite ideas. But yet somehow it all fits together.
Yeah, some people solo, and it's like, okay, you ran out of ideas. Like you're recycling,
right?
And this is like, you got that, like those sweet chords, and you got the tap solo, and then you have like some bends, and then you just have like, it's really good.
And he's not one of those guitar players who is going to run out of ideas. If you watch some of their live performances, especially around the Hagar era, the early Hagar era, he does Eruption for about like 15 minutes sometimes, and he doesn't run out of ideas. He keeps going, and it's like fresh and whatever. But this solo is like what? 12 seconds.
Yeah, it's not long.
And so that's kind of part of it, is like he has to fit all his he has to blow everyone's mind in 12
and I
seconds.
think that it's interesting. This is everything. So we're looking at the first Van Halen album and how we say that it's so interesting that it starts with Running with the Devil, then it goes right into Eruption, and as soon as Eruption is over, this is the song that comes on. It's almost just like he just blew your mind, and now he's going to show you how all these techniques will work in a song structure. I think it's almost like it's like he showed you his hand, and now he's going to show you how you're going to use them. What's a practical use for all this crazy technique that I just showed you in a free-form stance? Now I'm going to put it in a song, and I'm going to show you how cool it is.
And I'm the one for the stuff that he doesn't do in Eruption, because there are also some techniques in Eruption that actually don't show up in this song, especially that tremolo picking. But it is. I had a thought about this song. I can't remember what it was, but that's okay. We can move on.
Do you guys have anything else that you wanted to cover here, or we could go ahead and move on to the next one?
I think we're good.
All right.
Let's go ahead.
The third song in our set is Unchained, which is the third riff that I think that sits above all other Van Halen riffs.
That's what I thought.
This riff is so good. In fact, I think it might be my favorite riff of the three. This riff, I could literally just listen to this riff over and over again. There's just so much interesting stuff going on here. And it really is the spine of the entire song.
That's been a theme. That was a theme with Running with the Devil.
Parts,
if you think about it.
And you've got the other instrument. That riff comes in, that's when you know you're at the meat of the song. It's what...
Right.
That's, again, it seems like that's a part of the Van Halen secret sauce where it's like Eddie's guitar lines are just so key to everything that, unless there's like a synth thing happening, which so far in the set that's been not a thing, but like, yeah, his guitar is leading the song for sure. Like, even whenever, because I hadn't heard Unchained until I listened to this either. And so I was just like, but like, as you're listening to it, it's like, yeah, the guitar is leading the charge.
And one
sure.
One of those things that makes the riff so iconic is because those low chugs are not just normal chugs. He's got that flanger on, so it kind of has that shape.
Yeah, that boom, when it kind of feels like it's
so cool.
Yeah, I've never understood like what makes that sound, so now I know it's a flanger.
Well, I think it's a flanger.
Lucas.
It sounds like flanger.
Lucas, some
I
theory
love
for
a good
you.
theory.
The reason why that you don't feel like it has a tonal center is because
it doesn't.
It's hanging on the one, and then it goes to a flat 6 major, and then a flat 7 major, and then the 1, and then the 4, and then the 5, and then back to the 1.
Okay.
And you're not used to hearing that flat 6.
It sounds like it's
7.
going from a 1 major to a flat. Did you say 1 major to a flat
6 major,
flat 7 major,
and then a flat 7 major 1? Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, technically, if you were to say it like that, then really there is no tonal center, because those three chords only show up in atonal scales, not atonal, a non-root, non-orientable, whatever. I'm getting into math now. Into scales that don't have a root note. If you think about if you play C and then go up by a whole step each time, you have no root there. And so if you kind of play in that scale, it sounds kind of mysterious, like from some, old 60s movie or some cartoon or whatever, like you're, not in Kansas anymore or whatever. That's where the other way
to think about it is that they're playing a major 6, and then they're going 4, 5 major 6, 1, 5 major 6.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly how all that applies.
Well, but then you'd be playing a flat 2.
But it's still fascinating to hear.
Let's just say that I think it's Eddie experimenting. He does. There's a common theme in his riffs too, that he will do a lot of suspensions. I mean, Panama is pretty much just a whole, like the intro is just a whole bunch of suspensions over and over again. 316 is a bunch of suspensions. 5150. Oh my goodness, talk about suspensions. It's just it's playing that, easy bar chord on the D, G, B string, and then playing some kind of other chord with your other fingers. And that's kind of a lot of what his riffs are based off of, that basic idea. And I think this one is the same way. I haven't tried to learn this riff, actually, oddly enough. I mean, it's Van Halen, right? Why have I not? But I think that's what's happening here. That's what sounds like happening to me here. It almost sounds like a Van Hagar song, because there's so much happening riff-wise, suspension-wise. And it's a lot less, raw power from the first two songs, of the raw energy behind the guitar. Now it's like we're worried about melody a little bit more.
So
the bass,
yeah, so we actually have left the debut album now at this point, and we've gone to probably the most interesting album as far as legacy wise in their catalog, which is Fair Warning, which was their fourth record. When this album came out, this was kind of like the black sheep of their catalog. It was the lowest performing album because it really didn't have any hits on it. Unchained was kind of the only really accessible song on the album because it's a very dark, it's a very aggressive experimental aspects as well. And all the other albums had at least one or two kind of big radio hits. So, it didn't have a Cradle of Rock or Beautiful Girls or Panama on it. Even Unchained really wasn't a hit for them. It's kind of just a song that's more become a cult favorite as time has gone on. And that's how Fair Warning as a whole has really grown. It's become kind of the dark, instead of the black sheep, it's turned into a dark horse, where it's kind of the underrated album that people look back to and go, you know what, this secretly might be one of their best albums because of the fact that it's very risky. It's not a commercial record at all. And it's an album where Eddie was really in complete control musically and architecturally of what was going on. And, just on songwriting. Even on what, the fact that a song like Unchained with such a weird sounding riff and such an experimental riff is the most commercial sounding song on the album really speaks to what kind of record this is.
It's true.
Yes.
We need to talk
so
about
this
that
is
middle part.
So Ethan, before we started, you had said that when you listened through these songs that there was a lot of things that sounded similar to you. And I never noticed this before, but a lot of Van Halen songs have moments like this, where all the instruments go down and David Lee Roth just kind of starts like shouting, taunting, joking around. You've got like the Panama section where he starts, with the we're getting a little bit hot tonight, or the everybody wants some, the where'd you get that shirt? Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yep, it's got multiple moments. Kind of a moment like that. You look at Ain't Talking About Love. Yeah. He's got that goes down, and even the next song on our set has it. So it's a very much a trademark of their songwriting is to have these moments where the dynamics go down and Roth just kind of starts to joke around. You've got that come on, Dave, give me a break. One break coming up. Like that's so classic Van Halen.
Yeah. It's just part of their style. I think at some point it's like,
yeah,
I think that's just his thing.
This was like they were, a little bit annoyed at him, and that's kind of what egged on that particular take of it. by this point in their songwriting, the tensions were starting to build between Dave and the two Van Halen brothers, because they felt that Dave was being a little too theatrical in that he's hamming it up too much. And so I had read that on particular this song there was kind of a bone of contention that stayed in, and that's where that other voice of Dave, give me a break, just kind of like, come on, we're getting tired of this shtick that continually is popping up in these songs, and he's just kind of like, well, F you, I'm gonna still do it.
That's funny. So the come on,
yeah,
is like legit in there.
Yeah.
So
That is. I never noticed it because I was used to it because it felt like that's where the song needed to go.
And of course, it completely works.
Every time they used it.
It's such a great segue to get us back into that chorus.
Right, and they do that all the time. And now that Ethan mentions it, it's like, yeah, I guess so, but it's not like, at least to me, it's not like it ruins anything at all. That's what the song
it's a staple of the Van Halen sound. I just had never noticed how many songs had moments like that, and so it was today I was listening. I was just like, I don't think I've ever noticed so many songs have moments like these in their songs. And so it was an interesting thing. Yeah. And then Ethan said that right before we started recording. I was just like, and that's what came on my mind. I was just like, yeah, you know what? I did notice that there are certain trademarks, but, I don't think in any way it's a bad thing. It's what makes them them. Not a lot of other bands don't have those in their songs, and so it's something that separates them as this is our thing.
Yep. I think that's fair. And that kind of goes back to the way Eddie plays as well. Is he just has techniques that other people just, like, some of us, like me, physically can't do, but everyone else just didn't know how to do at the time. And that's or just weren't doing at the time. And so that's what separated them, or what separated him there, and that's what separated the band from everyone else as well.
Well,
so
Grant, what's the highlight of the song?
Listened to part of the song for me.
Well, I mean, Ethan was saying something. I can't remember. What were you saying?
The most listened to part of the song for me was easily that, like, middle random weird time signature solo thing.
The first solo.
I guess it's a solo. Like, I wasn't even listening to the guitar solo. I was just trying to figure out what everybody else was doing the whole time.
It doesn't sound like
so this comes in a popular thing that happened when Eddie would do solos, is that he would play out of time. It's the most famous instance of that being from Hot for Teacher, when he would play in when he would play in 7 instead of 8, and he would make the rest of the band play along to the timing of his solo instead of staying in 4 and him going back and fixing it. And so, I don't think I had ever noticed that there was something. But now that I'm thinking through that solo, there is a weird time shift there. And I had heard that story that he had said that they had done it on a number of solos before, but I couldn't think of what solos those were. Yeah, it's a mistake that he kept in and made the band adapt to his mistake.
That is such
Yeah.
a Chad move.
Because
I didn't
he's
mess
not
up.
like
You guys just
Grant's
get your
saying, he's
jack.
not overdubbing the solo later to where the instrumental track is already set in. He's what they're doing is they're playing it live
Yeah.
in the studio, and I'm sure that the first time he does it, they stop and they go, "Hold on, Eddie, you're supposed to be playing way," and he's just like, "Well, I don't want to play it that way. I want to play it this way." And they're just like, "Okay, I guess we'll change what we're doing."
The Queen is never late. Everyone else is
That's
early. Same.
Like, I got to the point where I could feel it and I could like kind of mime play it on drums, but it was purely based on feel, and I was not counting at all.
Oh, well, based on feel, that's I mean, Van Halen's not technical. The individual players in Van Halen are technical, but together they're not technical.
Most of the time. Except for the times that Eddie decides he wants to play in 7 instead of 4.
Yeah, but that's just him being a diva. That's not them being technical. That's not them getting together and say, "Ooh, let's put a 7/8 here." It's Eddie going, "Ooh, you're gonna put a 7/8 here," So the big difference.
It's like how they say that there's no accidental notes in jazz. It's but just like if you hit a wrong note, you just say it's just jazzy. It's a jazz note. I can totally see like Eddie making a mistake, and instead of saying that he made a mistake, just like, "Yeah, I meant to do that."
No, that he literally said that. He literally said that one time. He said that I've learned over the years that if you make a mistake, do it again, so that people will think you meant to. He said that in an interview one time. Like, that's kind of smart, but also kind of weird. But like at the same time, what? Because him playing live, he was like Neil, where he got better and better and better and better and better as he went. He never had that point where it's like, I think he's getting worse at guitar, how long until he won't be able to play the same songs, but like we never had that thought, never went through anyone's mind. And oh my gosh, what were we talking about? I just started thinking about him playing at the Hollywood Boulevard, and I kind of zoned out. We're talking about something important. I had a point
about him making mistakes,
and it was a big point. Yes, about him making mistakes, and so it's weird to think that, because I've never seen him make a huge, massive mistake live. I've never seen him make a small mistake live. If you listen to Eruption, actually, which it's interesting that you mentioned in the first episode that it was just like he didn't even know he was being recorded. Because if you listen to Eruption, actually, there are 2 mistakes that Eddie has pointed out. He said he made mistakes in the actual recording, but nobody really notices them because we've all grown up listening to that, and so we don't know any different. We don't, like, if somebody played the correctly performed version of Eruption to us, then it would not sound right. Yeah. Yeah. It wouldn't.
Well, I think
so. Anyway,
I think that Unchained is my favorite song.
Unchained, really?
It's the it's the one that I've ranked the highest objectively in my ranked playlist.
Really?
And I didn't even say this earlier, but I'll go ahead and rank not only the last couple, but I'll also give you context on where the ones from the previous episodes sit as well. So Running with the Devil is number 8. You Really Got Me, I put it number 13. Unchained, I put it number 5. and then Eruption I have at number 3. Panama I have at number 1. Ain't Talking About Love is at number 4. Hot for Teachers at number 2. I'm good songs.
We're gonna talk
I have
about
it at
this
like
next round, by
number
the way.
22. And then Everybody Wants Some I have at number 7.
What was the
Yes.
We are definitely gonna discuss this.
I'm the
number
one.
22? What? How is that 22? How? Whatever. I'm not gonna argue with it.
Yes.
We should go
Which
to the next
is
song.
number
Should go to the next
which
song.
is number 10
The next-
on the list. Mean Street.
What? Okay. It's a good song, but I don't know if it needs to be that high, but it's a great song. It is Mean Street. It's off
Yes,
the same
it is the
album.
album opener.
I was exposed to this song, not actually listening to the song. I was watching. I went through a Eddie Van Halen just craze phase for about like a year. As soon as they had that Jimmy Kimmel performance, it was just blew my mind because they were so great. And of course, like Wolfgang was playing with them, and I had never seen Wolfgang playing with them, so I thought it was really cool that like they were like father and son and whatever, and like, you know, me and my dad were like playing guitar together, and so there's that. And so I thought that was really cool. And so after that, you know, there was all the analysis of like how he played the tremolo stuff, and so that's how we figured out that he was basically twisting his forearm like he was opening the
I've seen
doorknob
him
just
do
over and
videos
over
of
and
that. I
over
was just
again.
like, that looks so weird and so
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
I figured out how to do it, and I knew how to do it for a long time, and I could get really fast doing it, but I stopped doing it one day. And now I don't know
Matt
how to
Bellamy
do
from Muse
it. But
is one of the best that I've ever seen do that.
right, and he kind of copies Hot for Teacher on Reapers a little bit, but in my opinion, and he does it well. But that kind of got me into the craze, and so I watched the Live Without a Net Eruption version. It was the longest one I could find, and so I just watched the whole thing, and that's when I noticed a lot of, you know, really interesting, you know, riffs and stuff that I had never heard before. And I just thought they were just him jamming out, but they were actual songs. And one of them was Mean Street. And so I was trying to figure, like, I would slow down the video and to half, and I'd zoom in, and I'd like try to figure out like what he was doing and how he was like angling his, you know, his thumb and his finger. And I eventually learned the intro to this, and it's another one that I forgot how to do, which is because I just started learning Metallica songs afterwards. So, it was so fun to learn how to do, and I'm kind of trying to do it with my hands right now, but
that intro is so good
because it's percussive. It's super
so
percussive.
Good.
It's one of those things that you can do on one guitar. You can do it without any weird effects.
I have no idea because again, I'm not a guitar player, and so I have no idea what the I have no idea
It's
what the
harmonics.
techniques are. But it's just like it's one of those ones I listen to. I'm just like I just have no idea how you even get a guitar to sound that way.
Lots of gain.
The very
lots
first
of
part is really percussive. It's kind of like slap bass almost. But Ethan is right. The second half of that is a lot of harmonics, and it's just a lot of really fast harmonics, and just he knows what he's doing, and he's only playing on like really like 4 frets.
Wow.
The whole time. It's just up and down the strings and different ways that he's playing those notes.
But it's such a unique sounding,
so
like
weird.
just even still, like you don't hear guitar players doing stuff like that. It's something that you listen to and you're just like,
Nope.
No one would even try and do this except for Eddie Van Halen. and actually put it on a song.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
didn't we talk in a past episode about the best musicians
I think
being
so.
the ones that are really trying
because
to experiment?
again, it's the ones that are experimenting that are pushing the instrument forward, and those are the ones that I think are, above the people that are mastering the current techniques, are the ones that are masterfully playing techniques that no one's used before. Because of obviously, I'm sure there are guitarists afterwards that have used harmonics more effectively, but the fact that he was thinking so outside of the box from everyone else at that time, and still doing
So
it
early.
to be where he was, even after everyone's perfected, he's still one of the best to ever do it.
Man.
So, yeah,
I love that first guitar solo, by the way, with those like the
this is a very bluesy song once you get outside of the intro. I think that you kind of got a different side of his rhythm and lead playing, which I really wanted to in the set. And
then we get that kind of, I hate to say campy because it's just that Van Halen part,
just like we were talking about in Unchained, where he even shouts out the name of the album. Someone yelled, "Fair warning!" Struck that poor boy down.
Yeah, and you have that outro section, which is not popular. Well, not popular. Not popular. It's not common in Van Halen songs. The only one I can think of, I think there's a 1984 song
where it's a fade out
outro like that, but I where it's like a fade out, but it's got a long.
I'm thinking of probably Drop Dead Legs. Yeah, that's got one with a long solo. I mean, in a way, Jamie's Crying is the same way, and Dance the Night Away, but those are less solos and more of just a lead line that's being taken out.
So the outro of Mean Street is kind of reminiscent of that outro of Drop Dead Legs, where it's more like spacey.
Yeah,
it's not really
it's a jam, pretty much.
It's kind of just a bunch of chords.
It's nice.
Yeah,
I was kind of surprised to hear it, not like a big fade out like this. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's not a normal, like, this whole song is not a
which is again another reason why I wanted to include on the set. I wanted to kind of get some variety of just, again, kind of showing as many different sides of Eddie as I could, to where it's not just shred, 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 shred.
I think this goes back to how underplayed his like riff building is.
And
it's not a complicated like it's like, that's not like super technical. It just sounds good. It's just the right thing.
Yeah, and it's really great that if you listen to the bass line in the intro, the bass is copying him, which is interesting that the bass isn't just playing one note the whole time. And so I think Michael Anthony deserves a little bit of credit on,
I would say that this is probably his most interesting song bass-wise. Just from hearing a lot of different bass lines that he's used in other songs, this is the one where I think that if you're going to show off just how good he secretly was, Mean Street is one that you would point to, because he even gets really a spot like when everything goes down and it's the David Lee Roth goofing off part. He's really kind of what you hear the most.
Yeah,
and he's getting busy.
Yeah, and when the riff finally starts, when the riff finally kicks in and David Lee Roth comes in and the band kind of, starts up, sort of, and the bass drops down to its normal octave, that's really the dynamic change that makes that riff kind of have a little bit more grit to it and a little bit more beef. And it's not the guitar in the riff, it's the bass, which is actually kind of weird to think about for a Van Halen song. That the
one
bass
thing I
is
noticed
really
was
driving the riff.
The bass copies the main guitar riff a lot, because I think whenever, and that's why the bass tone I've noticed is so good, because whenever Eddie goes away to like do a lick or something, I feel like not only is his playing and his tone full enough in and of itself to like have the guitar be able to go away from the riff, I think that the way that the bass player is playing and his tone as well also gives Eddie room to like leave the riff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's good to have a bass and guitar tone that complement each other, as opposed to, having a tone like And Justice for All. I was trying not to
Inevitable.
It,
I think you.
Are we ever gonna go a set of like 3 episodes?
I think you've mentioned it every time.
I don't think so. I love that.
Yeah, it does.
It needs bass.
I think we can go ahead and move on to the next song.
Yeah, because the really important part of that song was the intro. But this next song, which is actually quite a delight, I will say that.
My favorite song
is Romeo Delight off the Women and Children First. I will say that objectively, this was probably my favorite, honestly. And part of that is probably because I hadn't really listened to it critically before. I'd only listened to Women and Children First once. And
That's
I
a
didn't
good
really
album.
like it back then. I think I might need to
We'll talk about this more in After Hours, but that is a fascinating record. So it's the third record. In my opinion, it's kind of the true follow-up to the first Van Halen album. It's the album where they're growing and they're really starting to mature as songwriters and not just write exclusively party anthems. It's and Fair Warning is a bit of an extension of that as well, but to where it's an experimental dark record. And it's also probably their most metal album, as far as just a lot of the songwriting and guitar playing in particular is just very aggressive, and really still not a lot of metal to compare it to around that time. That album came out in 1980. That's the same year that Iron Maiden's first album came out. No, there weren't any thrash records out yet. Judas Priest was still kind of in the more commercial radio metal phase of their career. They hadn't gone, Painkiller Double Bass yet. So this was probably one of the more aggressive albums of its time. And Romeo Delight is absolutely one of the most unrelenting songs on that album. And I think that this is a song that really just shows how incredible Eddie was at guitar. It gives him a wide breadth.
Yeah,
I mean, the riffs are so good on this song. His solos are probably the most blistering on the set. And he's also got some great dynamics in this song. I think that this is also my favorite low section of all the low sections that they have. when it goes. Yeah,
It's got low
but when it
sections
goes
for
to that
verses.
last one, when he's doing the I think that's so great.
The one weird thing about this song that,
Yeah.
at least out of the 6 that we've done on the podcast, this is like the only song out of all of them that just like starts off with guitar and drums like right out the gate, like without like kind of like an official like dramatic intro.
Yeah, all
And I was like, whoa.
Yeah,
I was expecting
that's
kind of
true.
the typical like put a line out there and then like go into it.
Which I think at this point it's good to break up that monotony, but I hadn't really noticed that. But now that
that's why it's like the Van Halen formula. I was like, all right, either give me the lick, like what's the lick for the song just by itself, and then you're gonna bring the drums,
or give me like
but
an experimental guitar thing, or some kind of like running with the devil a sound effect. But yeah,
just like what's like the shtick at the beginning.
Yeah,
but like this is just like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like we just go into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this down section is so good. This down section is just so good.
Yes, it is. I love the kind of the pulsing hi-hats that are going on, and he's got the fading in guitar, and it's very.
It reminds me almost of like a sped up War Pigs.
Yeah,
mixed with
that's a good
Stone
comparison.
Cold Crazy. That's the best way I can describe this song, because I kept trying to think of the riff in my head, and it kept.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that either, but that's actually very true. Like, yeah, you've got the riffing, but then you've got the fury and the pulsing hi-hats of Stone Cold Crazy.
Right. And the guitar tone on this is so like scratchy. It's not screechy. It's just really intense, really screamy. Like their first album.
But it doesn't have as much of the fun party vibe that the first album does. It's got a bit of a darker feel to it.
Yeah. It sounds like we're moving towards metal. It sounds like it does kind of sound like Metallica.
And I think that David Lee Roth is on point on this song. I think that he just gives a whirlwind vocal performance.
That's so good. Yeah, this song is so good.
When he starts building it up with
how does he not run out of
building
breath?
up with the Feel My Heartbeat, and it starts to just really, the pressure builds, and then that last chorus comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So Grant,
legit the best
good.
part of this song are the catches and the verses.
Yeah, I would
like
agree.
That makes, in my opinion, it might not be like it's like if you didn't have these verses, like I feel like the rest of the song would be worse, because it's still aggressive, but it brings it so low dynamically that it just sets the rest of the song up so well.
Yeah. So Grant,
and those swells on the guitar sorry.
Yeah. No.
Great.
Keep going. I have plenty to, so
again.
Ethan, go ahead.
I like hearing the different guitar sound on the swell, like the cleaner,
Mm-hmm.
It just feels, this song feels a lot different than the other songs.
Yeah.
And then obviously they go into their thing whenever they go to the chorus, and it's great.
It is a little dark.
Yeah, there's almost like this manic,
kind of sinister
craze to it. Like it's like the lyrics are still about partying and having fun, but there's almost like a desperation to it. Like
Manic
Too much
craze. is the perfect
too much
word.
partying has kind of driven them insane in a way.
What are the lyrics to this song? Like what is it about?
Pretty much it's just about, about a man that's desperate for a good time. He's I've got whiskey and I'm looking for somebody to squeeze, and just trying to have pleasure at all costs, and it is driving him mad. Can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And just him trying to woo a girl, but at the same time, like, it's all starting to crumble around him.
You can definitely feel the tension, like kind of at the half point where it's like it goes down for that really long time until the drums kind of start pulsing in.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel it kind of like coming up to a head there musically.
Yeah, the whole down section to me is the brilliance of the song.
Wow.
As it continues to build, and then you think that it's gonna explode, but then it goes back down, and he comes in with the "Feel My Heartbeat," and then it finally just hits you, and that whole last chorus is so big. There's so many screams in the background, and yeah, to me, at this point in the set, it's almost like you take the energy, the kind of the dark energy that's building ever since Unchained, more aggressive, and then this that's really more aggressive. And then, I was actually for a minute kind of unsure of where I wanted to end the set. I knew I kind of wanted to go back to something more light and on, because, at the end of the day, this is an episode about remembering Van Halen. I didn't want to end on a dour or aggressive tone. I wanted to kind of...
I think that you ended it on the greatest song that you could have chosen to end it on.
Yeah. Well,
we're not done with this song.
No, are we? We can go ahead and segue right into the final song here. All right. And so, yeah, I just wanted to have something that was joyous, and as well as show off one more different aspect of Eddie Van Halen, and that's his adept skill as a synthesizer player.
He played that?
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and
I had
jump
no idea
into the final song.
No idea.
Wait, really?
Yep, that's him.
That was like the whole what? Oh my goodness! Let's jump into this one.
Oh, and by the way, I put Romeo Delight at number 6 on my ranked set, and Jump is at number 9.
Oh, really? That low? Okay. It's weird to see them do this one live. They did this one on Ellen recently in the past few years, and Eddie didn't do any of the keyboards because there is actually a guitar part that goes through the song. If you really listen closely, there's always a keyboard part and a guitar part throughout the whole song. It's just which one's louder in the mix at a certain time. During the verses, there's the keyboard up. During the pre-chorus, there's pre-chorus and chorus, there's the guitar that's louder, and then of course the solos.
Yes.
But do you think that there is a keyboard line ever written that is more immediately noticeable than this one?
Probably not. This is one of the most iconic keyboard intros of all time.
Don't Stop Believing.
Yeah, I would say as far as something that's more of a synth line, I don't think there really is. And the thing is, this is probably the one song that people would probably not know is Van Halen, just because Van Halen is known as such a guitar band and known as kind of more of a, like an aggressive sounding rock band, that unless you know it's Van Halen, it's not one that you would think, because it's very happy, it's very fluffy, it's very bouncy. It perfectly
It's pretty pop.
personifies the
It's kinda
word
poppy.
jump.
Yeah.
That you could be mistaken in hearing that and never know that it's Van Halen. Unless again, unless you're paying attention, it's just like, oh, I know David Lee Roth's voice, but most of the general public doesn't think that way. They're just gonna hear it and go, oh, that's a great pop song.
Yeah.
This was one of the first songs where it made me want to actually sit down and learn a solo. Lucas, you know this, but in Area 52, I don't really want to spend time learning the exact notes of every solo. I don't think that's really efficient use of time. And it sounds very, if you don't learn a solo correctly,
Mm-hmm.
it ends up sounding very robotic. But this solo was so good that it made me want to actually sit down and put in the hours and hours and hours into learning every note and exactly where it goes and exactly how it's phrased. And I've done that I can probably count on one hand the amount of solos that I have done that with. This is one of them. And so it's crazy that even though it's not even a guitar song, he's still making iconic
especially once you know that
instruments
he's doing the keyboards
with
too,
the song.
because this might be the one, whenever I was saying at the beginning, I'm picking songs where Eddie is front and center, and you would think on this one, well, he's not on this one, he just has the solo really, and that's it. But of course, when he's
But he has
playing the key,
solos.
yeah, and of course, just like you were saying with a lot of other songs, that keyboard line is the spine of the song. It's what holds the whole song together.
Right.
He's just a good riff writer.
Yes, he is.
He can even do it on keys.
He can't be held back by other instruments.
No, he cannot.
Let's talk about how weird that solo is, though, because I know there's a weird key change that happened. Grant, do you know kind of
so
in their
we
theory?
end the you end the verse,
Mm-hmm.
that little part on the verse when he says jump, that whole phrase ends on a 5, and then you go to a flat 7, which is kind of normal. It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's normal, but it makes music theory sense. Sometimes you might go up a full step, so that would be like them going to D, but instead they went down to something minor. And so it's kind of from the idea of, we were in C major, but we're going to treat it like C mixolydian. Which is normal. I mean, AC/DC
I think probably
does that
coupled.
sometimes.
I think it's also coupled because he has some really strange
all the time.
phrasing at the beginning of this solo as well. There's just something. There's something about it that's just, when that solo comes in, it does feel very unexpected. And I think also it's helped by the fact that you're not hearing a whole lot of guitar up to that point in the song, that it just kind of makes itself known in a different key, and the phrasing is immediately kind of atypical, even for a Van Halen solo, I feel. And I think just overall, I think it's a great, surprising left turn.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then, of course, the keyboard solo kind of helps bring everything back to the modal center.
Yeah. Well, and there's no snare drum in that entire solo section.
Oh, it's true. Yeah, because he uses a really weird beat there.
Well, okay. During the keyboard solo,
Wait, no, there is some snare, but
There's
his
no
snare
way
is also mixed
there's
really
no snare drum.
strange on 1984.
Like I couldn't even hear it
His snare,
Yeah, his snare
always
is pretty
been
much a
very
tom on that
until
whole
like
album.
I guess until the very end. But it sounds like he's just like boom, 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 boom. Like it just sounds like kick and bell.
No, there is some snare. It's tom. That's just the way his drums sound on that record.
Well, sounds bad.
That I don't.
Okay.
I slightly agree with you on that. I think
I
that
don't agree.
I think that in some ways his drums sound great just because it's so different sounding. Like his drums sound on 1984 is one of the most unique drum sounds ever on any album ever. It's something that you could not have, if you haven't heard songs on that album, but you know that drum sound, you could hear a random song off it and go, I've never heard that, but I can tell that's from 1984 because of the way the drums
His
sound.
cymbals and his kick and his toms sound great.
The snare is
right.
is the
that's
iconic
the
sound of it. Yeah, there's been some controversy over that snare. There's some people that really love it. There's some people that really hate it, and there's kind of not a lot in between.
Van Halen is very like Iron Maiden in that their mixes are
I would agree with that.
They're
except for maybe the first album.
They don't. They're not mixed like Rage Against the Machine or Ghost or somebody amazing. They're just kind of it is as pure to the sound of Van Halen live that you're going to get. And that was the whole mantra behind, Eddie and the stuff that he would write is he never wanted anything on the record to be anything that people would not hear live. He wanted everything that people to see on stage. He wanted everything people were hearing live to be seen on stage. So he wanted everything to be, maximum 3 background vocals, really only 2 because Alex didn't, do much because he was drumming, and the one guitar for the most part. I mean, obviously he had overdub and stuff, but he had the most of the time the thought behind everything needed to sound like it was live. And so it's not going to be mixed super perfectly and wonderfully and masterfully, and it's not going to sound like,
but it's always going to sound like Van Halen
record type mix. But it's going to sound
so there was another reason for me picking this song, and this was always the song that they would close their concerts with, especially recently. And ever since they reunited with David Lee Roth in like the mid 2000s. And it also serves as the last song that he ever played live because it was the closer to his last concert in 2015. So it also seemed fitting, like we start the set with their first song and we end the set with the last song he played with Van Halen. And so that felt appropriate to put this song here. Because you would think I feel like the normal thinking would be to put this song as an opener because that's really the way that it opens the album 1984. But I was just like, let's flip this and kind of do what they have been using it for as a triumphant closer.
Wow. I have to ask because it has been a controversy among my circle of cohorts. What is this song about?
I'm not completely sure. I think that because there is the people that are saying
because some people
Jump
say it's about
suicidal, but that also kind of plays against the entire mood and feeling of the song, but that hasn't stopped other songs from doing the same thing, hiding a really depressing message inside a happy song. But that also doesn't really fit with Van Halen in general. They've never been, at least not in the David Lee Roth era, a band to kind of tackle such serious subject matter like that and hide it in a goofy, fun song. So I think that I think it's meant to be more of a jump for joy.
I always took this as like a risk-taking song.
You know what? I think that actually might be it.
I think it's like, just do it.
Yeah, jump. Just
That's
take
really
the leap
profound.
of faith.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
what I had always like.
Jump.
Jump.
I think what it is
like,
it's
I know you're scared, but like just jump.
I think that because he's also saying like it seems like he's talking to a girl. I think he's telling her to jump into this relationship. I ain't the worst that you've seen. Can't you see what I mean? Might as well jump into it with me. It's going to be messy. It might be weird, but let's just jump in and see what happens. We don't have the answers. That actually is what makes the most sense to me as I'm thinking through the lyrics. So good perspective, Ethan.
Yep, the guy that doesn't listen to Van Halen.
Yep,
coming in clutch.
Let me tell you what. That's what it is like sometimes.
Sometimes that's what it takes.
There are the people that overanalyze, that live with it. They're just like, oh, it's probably this, and then sometimes it's the fresh set of ears that come in and go, you know what? It's probably this.
So tell me about your experience, Lucas, because this is the song that you mentioned, like that you cried on at the end of the set.
Yeah. So for me, I was thinking about just the fact that, again, this was kind of his final song, and to me, it was when it got to the keyboard solo and it comes right back into the keyboard line. I felt this symbolism of just like, this is a triumphant spirit leaving this world behind into a new and brighter place. Very much like a spirit carries on type thing.
Yeah.
It's it's triumphant. It's this feeling of going somewhere new, exciting, and better. And because it's a fade out, it's got that the guitar is really kind of chugging in at the very end.
Yeah.
This is something that will argue in favor of fade outs. And there was just this feeling of like, we're not ending with something that's dour or sad, or it's just like, this is a celebration of his life, a celebration of what he's done, what he's left behind for us, a feeling that his music is going to live on forever. And I had all of those thoughts and emotions kind of coming in right at the tail end of this song. There was just this, it was just joy, because that's the overwhelming feeling of this song, is joy. And so that was that's what I was feeling. I don't know if you guys got the same feel. Grant told me that he didn't, but
I did not get the feeling to the point of tears. No, having known that now, it's kind of emotional. Yeah, so I get that now, but I didn't know that this was what they ended. I didn't know this was the last song that he ever played.
So
that changes.
I'm interesting because I'm, outside of music, a very unemotional person. I'm very much I think it's left brain is analytical, very, like just systems and, cold hard facts and data. It's why I love the research part of doing all this stuff. But music is like the one part where like kind of I uninhibit all of my emotions. And it's the only time in my days where I'll actually kind of find myself tearing up and crying just because I'll be struck by the beauty and majesty of a particular song.
There's a lot of choral pieces that do that to me, and I'm sure there have been some sets in here that have done that. But usually music gets me, more emotional in other ways. Usually I'm not really like a crier person sometimes, but I would say that this song does give you kind of that overwhelming sense of joy in like, not for me in like a sappy way, just like, like this is a happy song. And like, this is a song that Eddie wrote, and this is the song that we're all going to remember him by. And I would say like this would go down in history as like the Van Halen song. So I think that's good, and that makes me happy because it is a good song, because he shows off without showing off. And I am glad that we will remember Eddie for years and years and years and years and years.
And also just the image I had in my mind of while I was listening to the tail end was just from the music video of him playing the synth lead and just having this big old grin ear to ear as he's playing it. It's just this, that's like the way that you want to remember.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, I think that wraps up this section. And we talked a very long time.
We talked for a very, very, very long time. What are we at now?
Definitely over half an hour. Yeah.
Well, for this
I thought you meant
alone,
like we've recorded for 30 minutes.
Hour and a half.
Yes. So
hour and a half.
We'll go ahead and take a break into our final segment. So make sure you stay tuned for our final thoughts, and we'll be right back.
What's up, everybody? It's Ethan. Welcome back to the Good Music Podcast. We just got done with part 2 of our podcast, where we listened to our 6 songs for the week, which were Running with the Devil, You Really Got Me, Unchained, Mean Street, Romeo Delight, and finally Jump. And so now we are on to our final segment, which is Final Thoughts. So Grant, you are the resident Van Halen expert. So how has Eddie's death, and now listening to these 6 songs, like what are your final thoughts?
I will say that something has changed. I'm gonna be more willing to listen to those 3 albums between the debut and Diver Down now, because Romeo Delight has changed my mind about that album. And so I'm very excited to go listen to that as soon as we finish recording After Hours. But when I found out that he died, Lucas, you were the one to text me, and I was like, there's no way he's dead. Like the dude is larger than life. And so I couldn't believe it. I still was waiting for the tweet of him saying, guys, I'm not dead. It's okay. Like, this is all blown out of proportion. Big misunderstanding. I'm fine. But that hasn't happened yet. And it's been 2 days. So I have to accept the reality that he's, like, not here. But I think it's okay. It's kind of like... And I this is a really unfair comparison, and I don't mean to be insensitive by it, but it's like if you have a old relative who, towards the end of their life, suffers from dementia, and then they finally pass. It's almost like a freeing thing for them because they kind of were already gone. Musically, Eddie was already gone. He wasn't recording anything new, but it was still just the feeling of him no longer being on this earth that still struck me. Even if he wasn't making music, I was still sad to know that he wasn't going to be giving his 2 cents on, this new PV amp, or doing any more interviews or whatever. Because Lucas was right. Most guitar players just like bow down at the altar of Eddie Van Halen, and we do, because he understands the craft and he understands the musicianship, because he was the one who made it what it was for a lot of us. It's like you never meet your heroes, or in Iron Man 2 when Ivan says, if you can make God bleed, people will cease to believe in him. It's like that. It's like he is mortal. He's one of us in a way of like, oh, we can play like him, but he's one of us, and like he met his end, right? Like, and it was, I just, yeah, it was sad. It was just lots of different emotions that just I didn't even know I had to deal with for somebody I never really met, and he doesn't even know who I am, and it's really weird to think that. But somebody who you don't even know can still influence you so personally.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, yeah. I think I'm just going to leave it there.
I would say for me, the feeling listening to this, it reminds me of the Iron Maiden episode where I come in, I really don't know a ton about Iron Maiden. I don't know a lot about Van Halen or Eddie. But after you go through and listen to it, and after, I went back and listened to the podcast that you guys did on it, it's like, he's the king for a reason, like he's at the top spot for a reason. And the same as what Lucas was talking about Jimi Hendrix, where it's like, I know that you're at the top, but why really? Because really I was like, okay, Eruption is a great solo, I guess, sure, you can put him at the top for that, but it's so much more. And I think one thing we didn't even touch on this was like the songwriting weight that he held with the riffs and the songs. It's like he was just more than a guitar player. Like we talked about, I mean, obviously his technical chops are great, but like the tech side of it, the showman side of it, the songwriting side of it, just every aspect of what you would want in a musician from that era, he was just the complete package. And so not very many people are going to leave the same mark on music that he has left. I think that he might, in terms of rock and roll at least, like, I mean, I don't know very many individual people that seem to have had as much influence on the genre in its entirety as he did, and as much sway on where it went historically. Like whenever we're doing our music history podcast, we'll probably have to do another episode on Van Halen and how that was the genre. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that big of a deal. And so I'm probably not sad in the same, like, of course, anytime that anyone dies, it's sad. Anytime that any legend dies, it's sad. But just a once in a generation guitar player, and so that's sad.
Yeah.
So for me, if when I found out that he died, it actually wasn't super shocking to me, and I think I talked about this in the previous episode. That there was a rumor floating around about the time that we recorded our last Van Halen episode that they were going to go do another big tour and that Michael Anthony was going to reunite with them. And around probably like November, December, January, it all of a sudden just completely fell through. It wasn't even officially announced. It was just supposed of, oh, we're going to get a true classic reunion for the first time, since the 80s. And then David Lee Roth appeared somewhere, and they asked him about it, and he said that Van Halen is officially done. I thought to myself, oh no, Eddie's sick, because he had a history with cancer. He had almost died of tongue and throat cancer in the early 2000s. It had like a large portion of his tongue removed.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't know, that's just what kind of rung in me. It was just like, oh no, Eddie's not in good shape. I don't know why that was the first thought. And then afterwards, that's what other people kind of started to chime in, but it never like gained momentum. Oh no, he's fine. And died. Yes, of course, it initially shocked me, but then at the same time, I was just like, I kind of had this feeling that it was going to happen. And so, what we found out actually today, their manager reached out and said that yes, indeed, that it was going to be a reunion tour with Michael Anthony, and the reason it didn't go through was because he received his diagnosis. And so for me, this was more of just like I had recently just gone on the same journey through Jimi Hendrix of just trying to really peel back the minutia of why was he the greatest. Because of course, when someone dies, all of the greatest descriptions of someone that you could have for them as an artist are flooding in. Anytime someone dies, people are going to start calling them the greatest of all time. And really kind of pouring through why. I feel like I'm continuing to understand him more as a man. And now yeah, Eddie's one of the greatest of all time, maybe the greatest of all time, but I don't think I ever truly understood why I was saying that. And I think I do now. And of course, that's augmenting the way that I'm listening to the music. And there's just a new way to listen to their music now. It's different when you listen to these songs when the guy's still alive. It immediately takes a new perspective onto the songs once they're gone. And we'll never be able to hear these songs the same way ever again. There's always going to be this new dimension to our hearing.
Oh, don't say that. Oh man, it's gonna make me cry.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
I think it was the reason why Jump has never affected me emotionally before, never ever, and now it always will. And so yeah, that part of me has absolutely changed. But I'm really glad that we were able to make this episode and talk about him. And this is definitely not the last time that we will talk. We talked about the are as the lead singer. That'll be an episode in of itself. And thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to us. I'm sure a lot of you guys are tuning in because you are also mourning and remembering Eddie Van Halen, and so we just thank you for listening to our very long-winded tribute to him.
Yeah.
And if you liked what you've heard, make sure that you hit the subscribe button to let us know what artists you want us to cover in the future. And there are 2 links in the episode description. One leads to the Spotify playlist where you can listen. Another one that will lead you to our Patreon page where we've got tons of and early content. Make sure to hit us up on social media, and we are going to now correctly be on the right schedule with Michael Jackson coming out next week. A bit of a detour, but we're going to be back on track. So no one's getting the boot. Everything's just moved back a week. And new episodes every Monday morning, 9 a.m. Central. And for those of you that are patrons, we'll see you in After Hours. I'm Lucas.
Grant.
I'm Ethan.
Keep on listening to good music.